Hello and welcome back to Is It Bloody Working? Where that's me, and Alexia, that's Alexia there. We talk about some of the questions that people aren't addressing in the personal development world. Today, we want to talk about how the personal development industry has a real problem actually around measurement and how people don't seem to be wanting to look too hard at that. You know, billions and billions of pounds are spent every year on coaching, therapy, healing, self-help, and almost nobody really tracks whether it's moving anything. So in this episode, we're talking about that, and we're just looking honestly and critically actually at the industry that has built around change but doesn't really seem to measure change. I mean, the statistics, Alexia, are pretty staggering, aren't they? You know, it says up to $60 billion in personal development industry, and yet there's no standard for measuring outcomes. It's quite staggering, really,
No,
isn't
I
it?
know. Even just that sentence you just said, an industry built around change doesn't actually measure change. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the whole issue in a phrase. And it's mind-boggling because you think about, this is a business at the end of the day. This is a thriving industry that's got billions going through it, and yet there are business people behind it measuring the money, and yet the very product, the thing that's at the core of all of it, is not being assessed in the same way. And if you ask people, well, why do you carry on doing the thing that you're doing? So I had a conversation with somebody last week because I was very interested about their meditation habit, and they said, "Oh no, it's really, really good." I was like, "Well, what do you get out of it? How long have you been doing it?" "Oh, I've been doing it for 12 years." And so, what is it that what's it done for you? Like, what do you enjoy, or what's the thing that you're getting from it? Well, it's really good, isn't it, to to do that for yourself and to spend an hour doing that for yourself. And I was like, is that it? And I couldn't get anything else out of them.
Yeah.
It appeared like it was more of a, well, I'm doing this thing. This is an important self-care thing that I'm doing. But actually, I wasn't hearing that there was any major difference going on.
No,
And
it
that's
sounds
the
like a bit
key.
more like a comfort blanket, doesn't it? Like it's
Yeah,
like,
like
you know,
I'm doing something about this. So at least I'm trying and I'm making an effort. But in terms of, but is it really working? There wasn't really an answer. And so, that's just one form of not intervention, but things that people do in order to feel better about themselves. And meditation is a huge industry in itself. But we've got coaching, we've got therapy. I mean, there was one statistic that we came across that just blew my mind when we were going through this before the show, which is the global coaching industry, which is valued at about 20 billion. And yet you've got the International Coaching Federation's own research shows that fewer than 20% of coaches use any form of measurement with their clients. I mean, that's
yeah.
crazy statistics, really, because coaching, when I was trained in coaching, we were very much about, asking them, having a goal that's specific, making sure that the goal is SMART, which means specific,
Hmm.
measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. All of
Yeah.
those, the whole of SMART implies a measurable outcome. And yet, only 20% of coaches, if that, are actually using some form of measurement. So, the coaches who were kind of really built on this idea that I'm going to help you achieve a goal and we're going to ensure that this goal is SMART, and yet they're not really then following through fully with that. Where does that leave, therapists, for example, where it's a lot more vague, not vague, but woolly because it's emotional stuff that's much harder to track? I just think that we're in a bit of a mess, actually.
Yeah, we are. And, you know, I've heard coaches talk for years about how they find it difficult maybe getting corporate clients because corporate clients want to know what the measurements are. They want to know what they're getting for their money. They want to know that things are actually being shifted or people are being, doing better after their coaching. And I've heard coaches say, well, it's impossible because it's all subjective and we can't do X, Y, and Z, but nobody's really addressed the issue fully. And it's something that is quite extraordinary considering the amount of money that this
Mm-hmm.
industry is worth. I mean, it's not that people don't have the money to actually look into this, is it?
No, no. And so maybe, I mean, this does raise an uncomfortable question, which is, well, maybe they don't want to because maybe what they're selling doesn't actually work. And because there's, this person that's doing the meditation, I don't think there was any real shift going on there. At least they weren't able to report that to me and tell me there was lots of talking around how good it feels to do and spend an hour like this on oneself. And yes, that's great. But if you're not, 12 hours of an hour a day, 12 years of an hour a day, that kind of personally blows my mind, thinking, well, that's a big time commitment. And to not really notice any shift on the back of that is kind of, what's that saying? It's calling him back. It's making him want to continue doing that. And that's good. And maybe he's maintaining some sense of wellness. And so that's all fine. But you do have to ask yourself, if there really was a way of measuring this stuff, then maybe it's going to expose more than some companies, some people are happy. They're not ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, let's just say that some people do get benefit from, let's say, meditation or other forms of therapy. People do benefit from it, but it's often so subjective, and often people don't quite, they don't quite see what benefits they're getting, and so therefore it's difficult for them to move forward. And but to your point, another statistic that we were looking at before we started recording this was 2021 review in the Journal of Evidence-Based Psychotherapies, I'll say that again, found that a significant proportion of therapy clients show no reliable improvement, and a subset actually deteriorates. And, people are kind of overlooking that. So, it speaks to your point about, do people really want to measure outcomes here?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other part of this as well is also with the clients that, we talk about it being subjective, and it absolutely is subjective. And one of the things that I've observed a lot with the people that I work with is that, I've observed the change happening within them. And I can tell because they're saying different words, they're describing the situation differently. When I can tell there's been a real shift. And I reflect that back at them, and they're like, oh, well, but maybe it's going to come back. Maybe it's not real. Maybe this is just a one-off. Maybe it's just because I'm sitting here chatting to you. They don't fully trust that change. This subjective piece is really important because even the person that's doing the thing might not appreciate or realize or clock that the change has happened. And so that works both ways. You might also have people go, yeah, no, this is really working. This is doing really well. Maybe, to the point that the person I was speaking to, they're like, oh, yeah, no, this is great. I'm going to carry on doing it. So that this can work both ways. Some people are not seeing the change that is happening, and maybe therefore not the way that I described that idea of, like when you, if, for example, if you to somebody, if you had a bad ankle, for example, and somebody lent you a crutch, and you're like, well, can I lean on this? Probably bash it about a bit and make sure you could fully trust on it before you lent on it. And until you could trust that crutch, you'd probably still hop a bit. And this is the same idea. Until you can fully trust that change is now part of you, that you are now that new person, that you now don't have that fear or that anxiety, whatever it is that you've worked on, you don't lean on it, you don't rely on it, you don't consider it part of you now. And so that can take a while for you to think, like with the crutch, you realize, maybe you fell over, you lost your balance, and you leaned on it, you're like, oh no, it is there. Oh no, it does hold me down. Oh, okay. And it might take another few times of you to kind of trip and lean on the crutch to realize, actually, I can trust this clutch. It is there for me. For you to realize that this thing that you've now done is now part of you, and the change that has been taken, that you've done internally, is now a new thing that you can now rely on and trust within yourself. So this idea of subjectivity is working both ways, and it would really serve us to have a way to demonstrate that the change has taken place for both the person that has actually done work that they don't yet trust fully or have not yet embodied or integrated, but also the person that's kind of hoping that they have changed, but they haven't really got a meaningful way to figure out whether or not they have. So they just keep going on regardless, imagining and believing that they've changed. And let's not, that's also a powerful thing. If you believe you've changed and you've believed, that can actually serve you well. But imagine all those people that have done the change that could have that reinforced within them which could accelerate the pace of change, positive change for them. But also those people that are doing things that maybe aren't quite working, and they'd be good for them to know, and maybe ditch one thing and swap it for something else so that they can allocate their time, effort, money, resource into something that is working for them, and for them to know that personally. I mean, I think it works both ways with this subjective thing.
It does. And while you were talking there, I was just thinking of a story that you've told me about, well, a couple of more than one client of yours who have done the work and completely forget that they were a certain way before they did the work.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So then it's quite nice to be able to look at the measurements and say, oh yeah, look, I've come from there to here. Oh
Yeah.
wow, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I always get my clients to write things down. I say, when you're doing the clearance, make sure you write this down, because you are going to be able to see in your handwriting how you felt about the thing 2 weeks ago, and put a date on it, because I want you to know that you felt like that on that day. And then you're going to look at it and go, wow, that was 2 weeks ago. I was still feeling X, Y, Z. And now I'm ABC. And seeing it in your handwriting is really powerful. Better than me sitting there going, oh, Hannah, but 2 weeks ago you said X, Y, Z. And they went, did I?
I know.
Yeah, no, that doesn't carry the same weight as when she's reading her own handwriting that's dated, right? So this is what I mean about people integrating and fully embodying that, and having a third party that's independent. Like, what I've always been seeking is a way of, for me to tell my clients, yes, yes, of course you've changed. I've seen it. They're like, yeah, yeah, you're bound to say that. So I want to take me out the picture, because actually they need to see it from something else. I remember when there was a really good breathing app when, I don't know, about 5-10 years ago, that you could use and align your breathing with your heart rate and lower your HRV, or do the
That was the Institute of Heart Math, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then there's a
Institute of Heart
good,
Math, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was a really good app that enabled you to kind of find out what your, I think it was he called it the emotional quotient, and it was called Breathe Sync, this app. And I would use this before and after I did some of my own clearance work, and I was able to observe that my heart rate variability improved as a result of doing the work over a space of like 20-25 minutes. And I really loved that, because my iPhone or the app didn't care what I'd just been doing. It was just giving me the data. And that's very compelling. And I found that very useful for me personally, because I could then see, well, my phone doesn't care what I've just been doing, and yet I know it's worked. And that enabled me to double down on what I was doing, so I can continue doing it and experience even more positive change. So having this kind of third-party independent measurement vehicle is really helpful to do this. And we should be encouraging it and having more ways of doing this within all aspects of the personal development industry, so that people can use whatever they need in order to progress. Some people, I'm a numbers girl, you're not. So I love seeing those kind of numbers thing, and that works for me. But there are lots of numbers people out there. You will probably respond to something differently, or having a different way of seeing that change. So we need to kind of cater to all of these people's, the way that we're built, what we respond to. But there's got to be a way of doing that, right? We've got to be able to do that. We need to look for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just circling back to the lack of measurement in the industry, and really one has to wonder whether it's because it doesn't serve the people who are working within the industry, because they're quite happy going along. The status quo is fine by them. But look, the whole wellness industry is worth what, 4.5 trillion with a T dollars globally. And look at what's happening with anxiety rates. They're worsening. Mental health statistics getting worse.
Yeah, I shouldn't laugh.
So what's going on here? I mean, surely we need to be doing something that will raise the bar here.
Yeah, because you're right. We've got a wellness industry that is clearly not working.
Yeah.
Is it bloody working? No, it isn't. Because if it was, we wouldn't be sitting on a mental health crisis right now.
Right.
Suicide rates rising, with, you think about the repercussions of mental health, poor mental health, and now how that spirals and ripples across society, with the work that I've done around the birth space. When you think about mental health among mothers and women, and how that ripples across the family unit and beyond, it's staggering where we are now with mental health and levels of anxiety and depression. And clearly, whatever is happening out there is not working. Like
No.
the data is telling us that. So we need, like, it's almost a matter of urgency that we start finding a way of measuring what is working, what isn't, so that people can find the help that works for them. Because people want to change. I mean, they're going to therapy in droves. They're buying these meditation apps in droves. They want a solution, but they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do because they're just throwing out and just seeing what sticks. Oh, I'm going to try therapy for a bit and see what happens there. Oh, I'm going to do this app. I'm going to get this app every day and do a meditation every day. And I'm going to do, I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to journal. And oh, I'm going to do some affirmations as well because that might work. And I heard that this thing might work and that worked for so and so. So it's trying all these things and not really knowing what is actually working and
Correct.
whether or not it sticks. Because there's also those things that work temporarily and give you a little bit of a blip, a little bit of a lift. And we've all been to those
I
rah
was just going
rah
to say we've all experienced
those
that.
rah rah personal development weekends that are high energy, high intense,
Yeah.
lots of people. I think you know the person I'm talking to that
Yep.
where you come away and think, oh my God, that was amazing. I can do anything. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then a week later, you're back to where you were, and it's all gone. That is Teflon personal development. That is. And so it doesn't really, you need to find what does work. And that doesn't say that going for a weekend or doing things that lift you aren't wrong. Absolutely, going to a music festival, going to the racetrack if it makes you feel amazing, doing something that lifts you is absolutely a brilliant thing. But we've got to be honest about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Again,
Right.
going back to, people go and seek out certain solutions and they hope that it's going to help them with maybe their anxiety or whatever. And it's like, well, no, maybe that's not for anxiety. Like meditation, some people they do meditation because they're anxious. Well, meditation's not really for anxiety. There are other
Mm.
solutions for that. But
Yeah.
there's not really any clarity available to people. Go, if you've got this and you want to sort that out, go over here for that. If you want this, go over there. This sense of knowledge and awareness about what I can do for what is going on for me and what is likely to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think people are fully aware of what is driving change and when that change occurs. There's some research been done in psychotherapy on, I think it's a dodo bird verdict. It's a finding that most therapy modalities produce similar outcomes, regardless of their theoretical basis, which means that whatever you do, it's going to come out the same way, kind of. What way that is, we don't know. And nobody's kind of quite sure what is driving that change. So we've just got to get our act together
Yeah.
in terms of how we deal with this, because those mental health statistics are just going to keep on rising if we don't, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And it's got to a point with mental health that especially, on the one hand, you've got mental health that's getting worse by the day. And it has been tracking like that for a good couple of decades. And then aside from that, you've got a world that is now heading into, well, I mean, it's just become a complete disaster, if I'm to be completely honest. The rate of change, the level of uncertainty that is going on right now is really firing people's nervous systems in ways that we've never ever known, like ever. We've never had a world like this. So you've now got worsened states of mental health with a world that we have never ever lived in that requires us to not be in such a frazzled state. And so that's going to exacerbate the mental health crisis even more. So now we're not, if you remove the environmental factors, excuse me, that we're currently facing in terms of the uncertainty and the change and the geopolitical climate, I mean, all the things that are going on that we've been witnessing over the last 5 years that has now accelerated, I'd say, probably in the last two. And now AI has added a whole new level of fun onto that situation. If that wasn't there, we the mental health crisis would be trucking along and still be getting quite bad. But now you've got that going on. There are some people that are just not going to make it. They're going to sink into holes. The urgency that we have around this it's off the charts.
Yeah.
So we absolutely need to be finding a way to collectively start measuring what works and what doesn't, so that we can start channeling our efforts into things that are working, because now we've got a bigger problem on our hands than we had even 12 months ago.
We do. And I just want to say here as well that some people listening to this might be saying, well, what do they know about it? But we've both been there ourselves, right? We've both done a lot of work on ourselves, and we've both been, as we've just said, to those experiences where you feel great for about a week, and then you just sit back into your old ways because nothing has actually changed. But I mean, you particularly have done a lot of work on this, and you've developed a way of measuring how things change in someone who's doing the work on themselves. So we do come to this with a bit of experience, don't we?
Yeah. And for me, I think the other part is that, when you are in that very dark place, when you are really wrestling with something that's taking over you, that's preventing you from moving forward in your life in a meaningful way, or keeping you stuck, at home crying in the fetal position, not being able to leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are things that I've experienced. And to know when you're in that state, we've got very limited personal resource in terms of energy, motivation, being able to think straight. When you're in that state, you don't have the energy to try loads of things. You just want somebody to go, this is the thing, just do this, focus just on that, because you haven't got the energy to just try all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then to try one thing and find it doesn't work, and then try something else. That's a blow that you can't necessarily take. Like with some of the women that I've worked with, where they've tried, some of these are women with severe anxiety disorders that might be also wrestling things like OCD, depression. They might be on medication for those things, and they've told me, I went and tried this, and it didn't work, and that must mean that it's me. So they've been recommended by their doctor to go and try a particular type of therapy, for example, and then it didn't work. Now, I can look at that and go, well, I know why that wouldn't work, because that's a mismatch versus what you're going through and what that is well suited for. So I could see that straight away. But the way that she's interpreted that is, it works for everybody else, but it's not worked for me. That must mean that there's something wrong with me. No, there isn't anything wrong with you.
Yeah.
You've just been given the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that wrongness that you feel about your own sense of who you are, that can spiral you even further down. So we have got a responsibility here as practitioners, as the medical community, the healthcare community, to be recommending things that do work, right? So that people don't spiral downward on the back of a visit to a healthcare professional.
Right.
They should be going upward, right? That's the whole point. And yet we're deriving in the dark with this.
Yeah, it's a bit like giving the wrong prescription of a drug to somebody for something,
Yeah.
Just take this, it'll make you feel better, and they don't, because it's absolutely not what they need for what they've got, right?
Yeah.
It's the wrong prescription. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it is a worsening issue. It's something that we need to talk about. And we will carry on talking about it in these podcasts, because we feel that it needs to be highlighted, and people need to find a sure way, a much better way anyway, of improving how they deal with their lives, and also seeing how they can change their lives, and seeing how they can change it so that they know that they're actually making progress and they can keep at it. Because the other side of that is that if you don't feel that you're making progress, some people might not feel that they're making progress, then you don't carry on. You give up, right?
And you might be giving up at a point where actually you are making progress, but you just don't feel it yet.
Yeah.
So, let's think about the metaphor of when you're renovating your house and you've ripped out the kitchen, and then now it looks like a nightmare. You've got dust everywhere. There's a gaping hole in the wall. The wind is coming in. You're thinking, this is going in the wrong direction. This is a nightmare. It's like, no, we needed to pull it out. So you put the new one in. You are making progress, but short term, it might look a little bit messy. And that happens with the inner work. And I've seen that a lot with my clients. They suddenly discover a deeper wound that they weren't aware of, and suddenly they're facing up to stuff that they thought they buried. Not that they consciously buried, but had been buried, and suddenly it's all coming up and surfacing. And that might feel difficult and emotional while they're in it. But that's what happens when you're bringing something to the surface to get it out. If you're hoiking some like old tire out the river, it's been buried under silt for like a decade, and then you got to pull it out. Well, while you're holding it in your hand to pull it out, it's going to be heavy and mucky and muddy. But then you're going to chuck it to the side of the bank of the river, and that's not in your hands anymore. Now you're going to feel lighter. That's what happens with inner work. You've got to pull that shit out And then while you're pulling out, you're going to face it, just like when you're squeezing a spot. Some point it's messy, but afterwards it's great. You've just got to. So why, if you give up at that point, when it's coming and surfacing and almost going past your eyes, and you think, oh my God, this is worse. I'm going to stop. No, it's not. You just needed to go through that to get to the other side.
Yeah.
And having that kind of awareness, knowledge that to tell you that you can trust that you can go, right, okay, actually this is moving forward. I am moving forward. I just need to get past this bit. And then I'll be out in the daylight and I'll be able to take a deep breath and it'll be all fine. Knowing that is important because some people might turn back at that point.
Yeah.
And that's what you don't want them to do. You want them to carry on moving forwards.
Yeah. But only if they can see that the proof that they have actually got somewhere and that they can carry on. Yeah. Is so important.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, that's quite a lot for people to get their heads around today, I think. Have you got any more thoughts on that before we get to our sit spot, where we just sit and contemplate one thing at the end?
No, I think let's do the sit spots. I think we've covered enough for today.
I think it is enough for today. Okay, so just continuing on the theme of do you know that things are working or not? I want you to just take some time and sit in just silence and ask yourself, something that you're doing for your own growth or well-being right now. Would you know how would you know if that stopped working? Now, we're not talking about how would you feel here, but how would you know if it wasn't working? And just sit with that for a few minutes and notice what comes up. Something that you're currently doing for your own growth or well-being. Could be anything. Meditation, seeing a therapist. Would you really know if it wasn't working?
Or if it was.
Or if it was, yeah. So, on that note, we'll leave you to sit with that for a few minutes and notice what comes up and see what the answer is. And we will continue this conversation another time. But for now, from me, JJ Stenhouse and Alexia Leachman, we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.